Hello, and welcome to Life Science New York's Spotlight Series, a regular series of conversations with founders, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and innovators in New York's life sciences community. I'm Win Thurlow, the Executive Director of Life Sciences New York, and today we're joined by Julia Felice, founder, president of STEMpower Studio. Julia, it's great to have you here. Thanks, a relatively new member at Life Sciences New York, but a real enthusiastic and engaged member, and one who's really doing some interesting and different kind of work. And so, Julia, I'm hoping that we can learn a bit about you and your work and your connections to New York's life sciences ecosystem. So welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you and the larger Life Sciences New York community.
So, Julia, we were chatting a little bit before we started, and I said, we like to start these conversations by learning more about the guest. And so,
Hmm.
you've got an interesting background, a bit of a varied background, and I'm hoping you can share your background and what brings you to this place on this day.
You're right. I have a delightfully non-linear career path, but that has actually all converged toward what I'm doing today. I am sort of a combination trained scientist, communication expert, and creative storyteller. What I do now is I partner with experts in scientific research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and I use my skills to help them translate complex, specialized expertise into messages and visuals that resonate with and motivate the audiences they need to fund them, partner with them, and bring their ideas to actual real world impact.
And let's dive a little deeper. You're a scientist yourself.
Mhm.
Tell us about, that background and then where that connects to the communications piece.
Yeah. So I started focused on engineering. I actually applied to 10 engineering schools for undergrad, and I submitted a visual art portfolio to all of them. So they might have just all accepted me to see what would happen. But I ended up at MIT, where I actually started in aerospace engineering, um, too specialized, and went to mechanical engineering. And I realized in taking a required biology class that I really had a passion for sort of human-centered science and life sciences, more so than I'd realized before. I was always really into math and design and structure, but so I ended up graduating with a major in biology, but with some strong threads of engineering in there. Then I was a public high school science and math teacher for several years. And then I came back up to upstate New York. I grew up in Syracuse. I came back up to Ithaca to Cornell to do my PhD. And I am one of the many Ithaca locals that didn't plan to be one, but just stayed, a couple of postdocs and, got connected to this incredible local community, met my wife, bought a house, have a couple dogs, so I'm here. Um, but yeah.
And it was funny. You and I were recently at an event at Cornell where,
Mm.
one of the speakers, a founder or a serial really entrepreneur and founder, one of the things that she was talking about was the challenges on making the transition from being a scientific researcher to being an
Mm.
entrepreneur and making a pitch. I
Yeah.
think one of the things that she said was, you know, you're defending your dissertation and your deck really ends with the conclusion. And yet,
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur, she discovered that, you really need to start with your solution or your conclusion.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious to know your thoughts on kind of that process and
Yeah.
how do you think about um, translating scientific
Mm.
messages into formats that are, I don't know, perhaps more targeted to an audience,
Yeah.
or help me unpack that, if you would.
Yeah. I've built frameworks over the years to help me understand this and build powerful stories. And you really touched on something that's a key difference between broad strokes academic communication, science communication, and everybody else science communication. Um, in academic scholarship and research, we are taught to communicate in a very specific way. And like you said, ending with the conclusions. We start with the background, the why are we talking about this? What isn't known? Then what did we do? What did we find? What do we think? And then finally, what do we conclude? And whether it's a manuscript or a conference presentation or a poster, that is always the format, this kind of funnel this way. And that's really just academics talking to academics in academic contexts. But kind of everybody else and everywhere else, even when they are reading the news, you want to hear the bottom line first. That's what makes you click, right? And then you learn the key details that would be most relevant to you, and then the nuance if you still are reading. And so something that um, academically trained scientists struggle with is, that sort of fundamental flip of frame. Um, and it's it almost goes against this idea of stating your conclusion before you've justified why it's there. And scientists have a huge range of audiences. There's the peer experts, but there's funders that may or may not share that expertise. There are legislators, policymakers, the public, the media, and they actually have to resonate with all of those audiences or important parts of those audiences to make their work actually have an impact. But they're not trained in how to communicate in that way, and specifically in a way that is centered on the listener and on telling stories. Um, so, your next question is, how do I think about that translation? Is I really help my clients and partners start by thinking about their goals and their audience. We're not just sharing data and ideas, we are doing it for a purpose. If you just find something, you don't share it with anybody, it doesn't do anything. You want to make a difference. And to reach that impact, somebody's actually got to decide to partner with you. They've got to decide to take action. And they're not going to do that unless they see the value of it. So helping them understand who is your audience, where do your goals align with theirs, and how do you translate the facts of your findings and innovation into messages that show your audience that you are actually partners, that you are both potential heroes in this story of solving a problem, saving lives, making an important system more sustainable, engaging them as people toward a vision with a human story.
And so, I'm imagining as I'm listening to you talk about perhaps the researcher, right, who has spent more than a decade on a particular innovation, right, and is
Mhm.
ready to take it to the next step, is commercializing, is looking for a way to raise funds, to find support. And I'm wondering how often or how you deal with the client who says, here are my 300 pages of research and conclusions, and frankly, 300 pages were edited down from 3,000 or
Yeah.
30,000, right? I've already
Yeah.
done the editing process. And Julia, you're telling me I need to put this into I don't know, a 10 slide deck or compress that to a story. I'm guessing you must hear this all the time. Um,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that?
Um, this is something that I deal with all the time. And I think that the the first thing I do is say, well, tell me about it. I want to know what's about your work and what's exciting about it because I love hearing about cool new science and technology. And by sharing excitement with them, um, I learn more about the nuance, what's important in the details to them and why. And then I also have a better understanding of what it is that they think is important and who they are. And I'm also showing them that I'm a trusted peer that is just as excited about the potential for their work as they are. Um, and when they talk about the challenge of cutting things down or the importance of every one of those 300 plots, I can speak to why it feels like that. You know, when you're immersed in like everything is important. And as a scientist, if you don't tell the whole story, it feels like you're telling a biased story, which is poor science. So, pointing to why that is important to them, affirming that, and helping them understand that um, we're not doing something bad here. We're just looking at it from a different lens. You know, when I go to an attorney or somebody at the bank, they're not giving me all of the details, and they're also not dumbing it down like I'm a child. They are giving me select details that I need, that are relevant to me, that I can act on, speaking to me like an intelligent person. And that is not doing a bad job at their job. And I don't need all those details. We both achieved our goals without compromising our professional integrity. So this is the same. You know, you're trying to partner with this person. They don't necessarily need all the details that you find interesting, important. They need the details that are relevant and important and actionable to them. So helping them understand the context and the why of this approach, um, and then also sort of maybe unpacking some um, concerns or fears that may or may not be salient. You know, if I let go of these details in the presentation, I'm not being honest or I'm not doing good science. Well, that's not true in this context. It actually isn't. And when you're trying to present the data, you're choosing to not present some. You're not getting rid of those details. They're still there. What you're presenting is something that's an invitation. What you're presenting is the goal is to have a conversation, to open the door. If they want that data, if you get in the door, those data are there. So what we're doing is identifying what is the message that this audience needs to hear to see the value of connecting with you and partnering with you, or the potential value. And then of these 300 plots, what are the ones that most clearly support that message to get you in the door? And then we can think about how this is relevant to them later. So really kind of it's this stepwise sharing excitement and engagement about their work, um, affirming and pointing to why it's uncomfortable to make this shift, reframing for a new lens, and then helping them translate for impact so they can get in that front door.
Okay, so let's talk about an engagement with STEMpower
Mhm.
Studio, right? When when is the right time for somebody to engage with you? Where in the journey should they be from your
Mhm.
perspective to reach out? And then what does an engagement look like?
Sure. So broadly speaking, I work with individual experts and teams and startups, as well as institutions that train cohorts or groups of people. So incubators, accelerators, uh, R1 and R2 research institutions around the state. And within those institutions, sometimes I'm working in tech transfer or entrepreneurship, sometimes in research. So what an engagement looks like really depends on goals, but the when, it's never too early. If somebody is trying to make an impact with their science, even if it's with their peer experts, it's never too early in the scientific process broadly to start thinking about goals, impact, and communication, because that's ultimately the bridge to impact. Um, so I typically work with people that are earlier or mid-stage when we're talking about the entrepreneurship world. And when I'm working with incubators and accelerators, I often come in and work with their cohorts as a trainer and as a coach, um, as they're figuring out how do we start thinking in this commercial value-based way. So teams that already have like an internal marketing and communications team, they've already figured that out and they've deployed some people to that. So the people that are still figuring out the why and the how, that's where I want to jump in.
And then for folks who want to reach out to you, I want to encourage folks to, I'm pointing as if you know what I'm talking about, to look in the chat. We will have both the URL for STEMpower Studio and also information on how to connect with Julia and her team. Julia, I told you this was going to happen, and unfortunately, it has. It amazes me how quickly we run through our allotted time. But in the couple of minutes that we've got remaining, I'd love to know from you if you had one vision for the future of New York's life sciences ecosystem and how we could advance it. What would that vision be?
I would love to see intentional growth in connections and collaborations between research, innovation, industry, entrepreneurship, and policy. So often this work is done in silos, such that there is a lack of awareness or understanding, or maybe there's misunderstanding. Um, and combining forces, that's where the magic really happens. And it's not, this is what scientific research is like, and this is what scientific, and these are often the same people. It's a lot more permeable. I think people understand. And so, really opening up those doors, creating invitations, and building understanding and a sense of mutual value and investment, I think would really unlock the incredible potential of scientific advancement to support health and economic well-being across the state. That would be really exciting. And I think that there are beautiful efforts happening toward that, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Well, listen, on that hopeful and beautiful vision, we're going to have to wrap up today's conversation, but I want to encourage folks who are joining us today to reach out to Julia, to spend a little time at STEMpower Studio's website and get a sense of the work that she's doing. Connect directly with her, and of course, we're always happy at Life Sciences New York to make those introductions. So. Julia Felice, founder, president, all around chief of STEMpower Studio. Thank you for spending some time with us today. It's been a great chat.
It was really my pleasure. Thanks so much, Win.